This video is brought to you by Captivating History. During his 46-year reign, Suleiman the Magnificent guided the Ottoman Empire with long expeditions and battles. However, Suleiman was very non-conventional in many of his interests and relationships, which could be considered a romantic view of life, especially for a sultan. This video looks at how his reign made such a massive impact on the lives of millions and how he was a very different ruler from his predecessors. Between the 13th and 17th century, the Ottoman Empire was a landmass to be reckoned with. The empire had started with the first sultan, Osman Gazi, in one small area of Turkey. However, after 1299, it had stretched out to most of the Mediterranean and some parts of the Black Sea. Mehmed II had conquered and added Constantinople and parts of Europe to the empire. Under Selim I, the empire expanded to Syria. By 1699, in the empire's height, it extended to the Caspian Sea and the Persian Gulf. It contracted and expanded over its existence, absorbing a myriad of cultures. Suleiman was born on November 4, 1494, just 41 years after Constantinople's fall, the event that led to a change in the dynamics between Christianity and Islam. This fall of Constantinople in 1453 led the previously Christian-dominated area to shift from churches to mosques. However, there was still a definite European element to the culture, with strong Greek and Roman influences. Suleiman, son of Selim, became the Ottoman Sultan when he was 26. As an only son, he did not have to fend off brothers for the throne, a battle for succession that allowed for legal fratricide during the Ottoman reign. Selim, who died from unknown causes in 1520, was a fierce sultan who ruled the empire for 8 years. As a sultan, he was responsible for trade and military movements. Under his rule, the empire had grown vastly. His legacy was massively influential, so much so that he would later be considered the first real Ottoman caliph or chief Muslim ruler. On the other hand, Suleiman became known as the Magnificent and was generally thought of as pleasant, wise, and good-hearted. He was believed not to be a warmonger, as his father was, and many European countries breathed a sigh of relief once he became sultan. However, they were to be proven wrong. At 15, Suleiman had become a provincial governor under his grandfather and had gained quite a lot of valuable experience that would serve him well later in life. He enjoyed studying and was educated at the Imperial Topkapi Palace in theology, military, history, science, and literature. Arguably, his approach was much more intellectual than his predecessors, one of the many things that made him quite different as a sultan. His love life was no exception to this. Sultans usually had a harem with several concubines that they would impregnate. The harems were stationed in the old palace in Constantinople. Once pregnant, the concubine would be moved away to raise the child. Eventually, the male child would become a governor. The concubine could only bear one child for the sultan and would not have sexual contact with him again once pregnant. Suleiman, however, fell completely in love with one of the women of his harem. A Scandinavian slave known as Haseka Hurum, or Joyous One, made him break all the rules regarding concubines. They would begin an affair that would lead to their marriage and 130 years of the imperial harem exerting political influence. It was completely unheard of at the time that a slave would become a sultan's wife. Sultans did not get married, and definitely not to a slave. The couple lived in separate quarters until, in 1536, a fire damaged the old palace where Haseki, also known as Roxolana, lived. She used this opportunity to convince Suleiman to move the whole harem to Topkapi Palace. Again, this was completely unheard of, but as the sultan could make his own rules, he did. Roxolana was very possessive of the sultan. There are several stories of Roxolana fighting with other concubines. In particular, there was a long-documented rivalry between Roxolana and an older concubine, Mahidevran. Eventually, Suleiman banished Mahidevran and her son to Anatolia, leaving Roxolana with no romantic adversaries in the harem. Roxolana was also very jealous of any younger potential concubines and would regularly become quite upset about this. However, Suleiman was quite the romantic. He decided to marry her and remain monogamous with her for the rest of his life. She now had the title of Haseki Sultan, or Imperial Consort, which would be passed on for generations. As both an intellectual and a romantic, It is no surprise that Suleiman was quite the poet. Under his reign, arts and culture flourished. He wrote poetry in Persian and Turkish, even having his own pen name, Muhibi. The poetry covered themes such as his wife and children. Seeing the importance of art in society, Suleiman was also a patron. He was responsible for the creation of hundreds of artistic societies. Not only that, but he was also a great supporter of Ottoman architecture. Under his reign, he restored the Dome of the Rock and the Jerusalem city walls, built mosques, bridges, and palaces. He even appointed a chief architect, Mimar Sinan, a former royal soldier with a talent for engineering. Over the coming years, Sinan constructed over 300 buildings throughout the empire for several sultans, many still standing today. In fact, he is credited with creating and establishing the Ottoman architectural style. One of his most famous works was the Süleymaniye Mosque in the city of Istanbul. The impressive complex also includes several schools, a medical college, a hospital, a public bath, and a market street. A fundamental part of the Ottoman Empire was the Sultan's ability to produce male heirs. These could be born either from marriages or concubines, but all would be able to compete for the throne. Suleiman also fathered several children by different concubines, as well as Roxolana and Mahidravan. He had 8 sons and several daughters, although the exact number of daughters is unknown, as they were not considered any great consequence. Mahidevran also had several children for Suleiman, most notably Suleiman's second son, Mustafa. Other sons, Mahmud and Murat, both from unknown concubines, had died young. It would be Mustafa who would be a major contender for the throne. In 1521, Roxolana gave birth to her son, Mehmet, adding even more tension to the mix with Mahidevran. Mustafa was apparently a delightful young man with much promise. Well-educated and an excellent soldier, it was expected that he would be the next sultan. Mehmet died in 1543 from smallpox, although it was rumored that there may have been some foul play on Mahidevran's part. Suleiman was heartbroken, and it was likely that he had wished Mehmet to take the throne. Mehmet's death earned Suleiman the title of Magnificent Father, as he grieved deeply, spending 40 days at his son's graveside. He also erected a mosque complex called Cesare Camille, or Mosque of the Prince, to show his love for Mehmet. On the other hand, Suleiman may not have been the greatest father. November 1533 saw Suleiman summon Mustafa to his tent when on the way to Iran. Here, Mustafa was strangled to death, with sources saying that Suleiman egged them on. Bayezid, another son and possible heir to the throne, would also die at the hands of his father, as he would be eventually perceived as a traitor. Suleiman had other sons, Cihangir with Roxolana, who was ineligible for the throne due to his deformed back, and Selim and Bayezid with Mahidravan. While Cihangir would die, Selim and Bayezid would be at loggerheads, with Selim eventually succeeding his father. Unorthodox relationships were not only limited to Suleiman's romantic life. His closest friend, Ibrahim Pasha, was another example of how he flaunted his predecessor's traditions. By 1524, Suleiman had been sultan for around 3 years. Ibrahim was a page in Suleiman's court from Greece. He had been captured by pirates and sold into slavery. Still, there are several conflicting accounts of exactly how he made it to Suleiman's court. Whatever had happened to Ibrahim after his capture, he was well educated in several languages, musical instruments, and literature. Clever and quick-witted, he and Suleiman became close almost instantly. Ibrahim moved quickly through the ranks, eventually becoming Grand Vizier, or Chief Officer of State, for Suleiman. Again, this was an unprecedented move on Suleiman's part, as it was unheard of to make a slave boy a powerful government official. Both men were very close for years to come, with some accounts even stating that Ibrahim married Suleiman's sister Hatice. They fought together, sometimes sharing a tent on the battlefield. Ibrahim even slept in a bedroom close to Suleiman's in the palace. However, this friendship would not last. After a campaign to Baghdad in 1534 or 1535, Ibrahim fell from favor with Suleiman. It is unclear if Ibrahim had become too powerful within the Ottoman Empire or whether Roxolana felt threatened by his presence. Whatever the reason, in March of 1536, Ibrahim was found dead in his tent. Although the exact cause of death was unclear, it was suspected that he had been strangled, as Mustafa would be in the future. Being close to Suleiman could potentially be dangerous. Suleiman also made a massive contribution to the Ottoman Empire's growth. starting almost immediately after his father's death, Selim the Grim. Suleiman's father had potentially been planning a Hungarian campaign just before his death. Many countries believe that these plans died with Selim. However, these were actually part of Suleiman's first campaign to Belgrade, the capital of Serbia, just south of Hungary. Suleiman wanted to control the sea lanes in the Mediterranean. After successfully taking Belgrade in August 1521, he defeated Rhodes in December of the next year. After 2 successful campaigns, Suleiman set his sights on Hungary, taking Buda, the Hungarian capital, in September of 1526. However, Suleiman left Hungary after 10 days to take care of uprisings in Anatolia, known today as Turkey. He would have to return to Hungary to take care of the political crisis that his invasion had created, as the Hungarian king had died in the Battle of Mohacs. Also, there were no surviving Hungarian soldiers, as no prisoners were taken. All were executed. Over 24,000 Hungarian infantry and cavalry died. Suleiman left an empty throne behind him as he went to deal with the mess in Anatolia. In his wake, the Hungarians elected a successor. Still, Archduke Ferdinand of Austria, the brother-in-law of the dead Hungarian king Lajos, strongly disagreed and crowned himself king. Suleiman returned to settle the dispute in 1528, choosing John Szapolyai, the Hungarian estate's pick, as king. Despite this, Ferdinand moved into Buda and set himself up as monarch. Suleiman retaliated against this in 1529. He launched another campaign, taking Buda back quickly and laying siege to Vienna. Vienna fought back, and the following year Ferdinand took Buda back again. This was not an easy battle and began a decades-long conflict with Hungary, continuing until 1533, when a truce split Hungary into 2 territories under Ferdinand and Szapolyai, both ruled by the Ottoman Empire. 1533 saw Ibrahim Pasha start a campaign against the Iranian Safavids, which would also last for decades. The campaign saw the Ottoman Empire wish to lay claim to Baghdad, but Shah Tahmasp had other ideas. Baghdad was a significant city for international and local trade. Ibrahim took the cities of Bitlis and Tabriz for Suleiman. When the two were reunited in 1534, they easily took Baghdad together. Despite his efforts, this was the campaign where Suleiman began to dislike Ibrahim. There would be 2 more campaigns launched in Iran over the next 15 years. However, neither was as successful as the Baghdad campaign. The first campaign in 1548 saw Suleiman send the Shah's brother, Alkas, to the Iranian border. Suleiman followed and managed to capture the cities, including Tabriz and Van. He returned to Constantinople in 1549, disheartened as Alkas had been captured. The final expedition against Shah Tahmasp in 1552 saw the Ottoman army defeated. Not only did the Shah force the Ottomans back, but he also managed to reclaim some of his lands. This ended with the Treaty of Amasya in 1555, which established permanent borders between Iran and the Ottoman Empire. The death of King Szapolyai in Hungary in 1540 saw the previous truce raise tensions violently. Part of the truce had stated that when Szapolyai died, Ferdinand would become the only ruler of Hungary. However, Szapolyai had a son, which the Bishop of Varad wished to become king. Because of this, Ferdinand laid siege to Buda. In 1541, Suleiman fixed this problem by appointing an Ottoman to govern the city. He also made Szapolyai the king of Transylvania, an eastern part of Old Hungary. Angered with this decision, Ferdinand attacked Buda again in 1542. Helped by his ally King Francis I of France, Suleiman retaliated. By 1544, the Ottoman Empire had captured many of Ferdinand's fortresses, leading to his eventual surrender. Finally, Ferdinand renounced his claim to Hungary, managing to keep a few Hungarian territories. He did not cause any more significant issues for the Ottoman Empire until he successfully negotiated for Transylvania. The bishop was in charge of the country, as the prince was still too young. After parting with a significant sum of money, Ferdinand was given Transylvania, despite Suleiman's protests. With Habsburg's power significantly increased, more political unrest was on the horizon, with Suleiman right in the middle of the chaos. When the bishop was murdered in Transylvania, trouble followed, as many vied for the throne. There were plenty of rebellions and mercenaries. Tensions involving the French, Spanish, and the Habsburgs with the Ottoman Empire ensued. Suleiman was also involved in conquest by sea. Most Ottoman naval pursuits took place in the Mediterranean, which the Portuguese also had access to. In particular, the Portuguese had dominated the trading route from the Indies to the Cape of Good Hope. Portuguese domination of the trade routes did not bother Suleiman much until the 1530s, when his trading routes in the Mediterranean began to suffer. To secure supplies of spices, he needed access to the East Indies, and Portugal was in the way. In 1538, Suleiman sent a naval fleet to India to attack the Portuguese fort of Diu. He failed, despite his general, Suleiman Pasha, taking several garrisons along the coast of Yemen. The Portuguese fought back, and conflict began. Up until the early 1540s, Suleiman was still attempting to gain safe passage to his merchant ships. The Ottoman Empire attempted to set up ports, open trade, and capture fortresses along the coast. Ultimately, however, the Portuguese were too strong to conquer. By the mid-1560s, he gave up trying to control trade in the Indian Ocean, diplomatically or otherwise. Instead, he turned his attention back to the more important issues of the Mediterranean and Hungary. Suleiman's final campaign was to be against Hungary. In 1564, Ferdinand died, leaving his son, Maximilian, in his wake. Suleiman and Ferdinand had not been fighting for years, but Maximilian wished to continue to rule Transylvania as his father's successor. Suleiman disagreed. As Maximilian made his way to Transylvania, Suleiman ordered his governor-general to cut off the new Habsburg king. Most of the Ottoman troops were fighting at a siege in Malta. When the governor made little progress, Suleiman decided to go on the battlefield himself. Despite his advanced age, he left Constantinople for the last time in May of 1566. He led his troops, for the final time, to capture the fortress of Szeged in Hungary. The fortress fell on September 7, 1566, just a few months after Suleiman's arrival, adding another conquest to the Sultan's large list. Unfortunately, Suleiman did not know he had won, as he had died the night before. Suleiman's legacy left the Ottoman Empire with plenty of new architecture, art, and poetry. He also managed to expand the empire during his long reign. Somewhat romantic, somewhat brutal, he certainly flaunted customs and tradition, proving himself as a sultan completely unlike any of his predecessors. His relationships defied class and tradition, paving the way for others to travel up the hierarchy in the future. If you are interested in learning more, check out our book, Suleiman the Magnificent, a captivating guide to the longest reigning sultan of the Ottoman Empire. It's available in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while they're still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.